This is the Dope Farm Podcast. Welcome back to the Dope Farm Podcast. This is Win, and I'm your host. Let's go ahead and just get started. As you know, I've been reading George Washington's Rules of Civility and Decent Behavior in Company and Conversation. So we're up to Rule 3, and Rule 3 reads, "Show nothing to your friend that may affright him." So let's kind of analyze that. And I mean, man, there's a lot of things in this world today that probably would shock our founding fathers to the core. Just the rudeness that people have in society today. People just don't care. There is no civility and decency. And I think that's why it's important to read these things, because I think we need, as a society, to treat people better, to get back to a civil nature. Because, I mean, it's just disgusting how people treat each other today. So it's a pretty simple notion that, you know, don't do things to shock your friends. If you're that type of person, well, you know, you are. But it's, you know, man, some people just try to be as obnoxious as possible. I've had friends that were like that. And over time, I've distanced myself from them because it's just not worth having that negativity in your life. So let's move on. So I'm going to try to start something new this week, and I'm going to call it the Weed of the Week. And my main inspiration is a gentleman by the name of Dean. Well, he just goes by Green Dean. And he's got a website called Eat the Weeds and other things too. And so one of my favorite survival foods or survival wild edibles is the cattail, just because it's so pervasive in my area. I live in the eastern part of North Carolina, and there are just such an abundance of cattail in my area. So I think it would be something that would be very beneficial to have or to know about in a survival situation. You can literally survive off of cattail. It's full of nutrition. It's full of many different things. And what I'm going to do, and I'd really like some feedback. I don't know how you like the reading of articles and things of that nature. But I cannot go out and reproduce a lot of this information because it's already there. And so I'm just kind of taking advantage of what's already been put out. But I want to give credit where credit is due. This guy really knows his stuff. He's down in Florida. And I highly recommend, if you have an interest in wild edibles or anything of that nature, that you take a look at Dean's website, eattheweeds.com, because I will probably be referencing it quite a bit. I highly recommend a book called The Peterson's Field Guide. I don't have it close at hand. I believe it's probably in my truck where it spends most of its life. I have a small library that I carry around the farm with me on a daily basis, mainly just to have as a reference to find and look at wild edibles, especially in the spring. So I'll put a link to that in my on my website. So, getting back to Green Dean's webpage here, this was first published, I think one of the comments is like 2011, so it's a pretty old article. But it's called Cattails, a Survival Dinner. Cattails, Swamp Supermarket. The United States almost won World War II with cattails. No green plant produces more edible starch per acre than the Cat O' Nine Tails. Not potatoes, rice, taros, or yams. Plans were underway to feed American soldiers with starch when World War II stopped. Lichen is not a green plant. Might produce more carbs per acre. 1 acre of cattails can produce 6,475 pounds of flour per year on average. And that's quoting Harrington, 1972. 2 species of cattail are common in North America today. One is the Typha latifolia, and the other is the Typha angustifolia. Excuse me for my poor pronunciation. Typha is from the Greek and means marsh. Now, you know how typhoid got its name, or typhoid. Typhoid Mary. Lafolia means wide leaf, and angustifolia means skinny leaf. Besides that difference, the T. lafolia likes shallower water, and the T. angus deeper waters. Just ignore my pronunciations. So wide leaf and narrow leaf. But it is not unusual to find them living side by side, and also crossbreeding. La Augustifolia, perhaps. Cattails get their name from mature brown cylindrical flower spike. When I was a kid, we used to use the dried spikes as torches while skating in the wintertime. The end of the season fluffy tails makes excellent tinder, and the Indian used them for insulation, mattresses, and absorption. There is so much to know about the cattails that a book could be written just about them. First, no other plants in their mature stage look like cattails, so it is difficult to misidentify. Younger plants can be misidentified with toxic ones, so always look for last year's classic growth to confirm you have found cattails. Cattails are oval at the base, but not flat or not flattish. They also are very mild tasting and without much aroma, meaning if what you think you've got is a cattail and it is a strongly flavored or aromatic, not counting the smell of mud, you've got the wrong plant. It is said that if a lost person had found cattails, they have 4 of the 5 things they need to survive: water, food, shelter, and a source of fuel for heat. The dry old stalks. The one item missing is companionship. Of course, the other thing to point out is that no matter where the water flows, downstream is civilization in North, Central, and South America. Remember that when you are lost in the Americas, this does not hold true in Africa or Siberia. Many rivers in Africa are largest near the source, then dry up as the water is used or evaporates. In Siberia, rivers flow north towards the uninhabited Arctic. One Boy Scout motto is, "You name it and we'll make it from cattails." Cattails are the supermarket of the wilds. The young, cob-like tips of the plant are edible, as is the white bottom of the stalk. Spurs off the main roots and the spaghetti-like rootlets off the main roots have vitamins A, B, and C, potassium, and phosphorus. The pollen can be used like flour. I like their convenience as a trail nibble or canoe nibble, as it were. Just pull on one where it pulls apart from the stalk. There's usually a tasty bite or two. I think the best part, though, are the new shoots off the main root. They start out looking like alligator's tooth, then are a pointed hook 3 or 4 inches long. The roots themselves need some processing, and I'll get to that in a moment. Cattails have a surprising function in history. The spread of cattails in any body of water is an important part of the process of open water being converted to marsh, then dry land. They are native to both North America and Europe. In Europe, cattails are called bulrushes, or greater reed mace. They are first mentioned, meaning mentioned in writing, in the United States in the 1830s, and at that time they were only found along the Atlantic seaboard and the Gulf of Mexico, excluding Texas. They weren't even reported in places like Wisconsin until after World War I. They weren't a significant plant in the Dakotas until the 1960s. Native cattail, Typha gracilis, seems to have all but disappeared, hybridizing with the European version to form the 2 species mentioned here. Eastern Indians use cattails extensively, not only for food, but for hemp and stuffing. In fact, one Indian word for cattails means fruit for papooses' bed. The fluff was used in diapers and for menstruation. Like most aquatic plants in the area, the cattail is also home to a beetle grub that fish like. On a green cattail, look for an outer leaf that is gone brown at the bottom of the leaf and the main stalk. You will find a grub. Actually, it's a larval form of an arrowhead beetle of the Listronius genus. The size y'all have to excuse me. The size will vary, but they do grow big enough for a small hook, and fish love them. As a weevil, the grub is also probably edible by humans, but I haven't gotten around to try one yet. You can find the same grub in the tops of bulrushes and wapato. As mentioned earlier, cattails are a champion of starch production. The way you get the starch is to clean the exterior of the roots and crush them in clean water and let them sit. The starches settle to the bottom, then one pours off the water. It may take several drain and settle sessions to get rid of the fiber. I sampled the starch raw once and got a bit of a stomach ache. Once you have just the starch, it is excellent for cooking as you would any flour. Getting starch that way is quite labor intensive. Here are 3 other ways to get root starch. Dry the peel roots while they are wet. They are difficult to peel when dry. Chop roots into small pieces and then pound them with a little water. When the long fibers are removed, the resultant group powder can be dried and used as flour. The roots can also be boiled like potatoes, then the starch chewed out, spitting away the fibers. Or you can also roast the root in a fire until the outer spongy core is completely black. Then chew the starch off of the fiber. Don't eat the fiber. It will give you a stomachache. I know from personal experience. The advantage of the latter method is no pots or pans are needed. If you have a fire and a pond, you have a nutritious meal. You can also put the roots on the barbecue. Lastly, cattails, Typha lafoliae, is suspected in a fetal poisoning for several horses in Indiana, one case over 80 years ago. Symptoms included stiffness, disinclination to move, profuse perspiration, and muscular trembling. So at the end of each article, Green Dean puts an itemized plant profile. So I'm going to go ahead and read that to finish it out. Identification. Cattails grow to 9 feet. Leaves are strap-like, stiff,